Okay. Welcome everyone. Thank you guys for being here. My name is Alexia and I'm going to host today's panel on the Holly Street Power Plant, a discussion on that. Poder is celebrating its 30th year of dignity and struggle. And for the celebration, we've decided to host a series of panel discussion regarding the various struggles that Poder has gone through to shut down or relocate some of the most hazardous facility impacting community of colors in East Austin, Texas. So for example, on May 27th, we discussed the struggle to close and relocate the tank farm facility, which is a facility that stored gasoline, and the products were causing harm to the community and the environment. And then on June 24th, we also had a panel discussion on BFI, which is the Browning Ferris industry that was bringing over 350,000 household recyclables to East Austin and causing a lot of pollution and creating a little landfill. And if you want to check out those videos, you can go to Poder's website, which is poderaustin.org, to view the two prior panel discussions, which are uploaded on YouTube. And so, like I said, today we're going to be talking about the Holly Power Plant. And we have some amazing panelists today. We have Marcos de Leon, Elisa Montoya, Dr. Sylvia Herrera, Raul Alvarez, and Susana Almanza, which are all longtime community organizers and environmental justice activists. And what we're going to start with today, we're going to start with a video showing some of the struggles that happen with the Holly Power Plant. So I'm going to share my screen for us to view that.
It really borderlines something almost inhumane. Why would you want to harm other human beings this way?
It's the same thing here. When it comes down to number one, we're not at the table.
The community has been lied to so many times. Another accident will happen. It will happen.
The plant has 4 units. They were built in years around 1960, 63, 68, and 76, I believe. It probably was initially selected to be close to the demand, which was downtown for this power plant.
So if it's serving somebody else, then we have to carry the burden. We have to be sacrificed so someone else, electricity can be turned on, so someone else can have a nice air condition, so somebody else can have a party back of their backyard.
The power plant had no business being in a residential area. And so we were really pushing forward the whole issue of environmental racism, of putting unwanted industry next to people of color communities.
I feel that was a ill-advised decision, I guess, to have located it in a residential area, because it was a long time ago when, maybe there wasn't as much public scrutiny or, political clout, that East Austin had.
The community was already established in that particular area, and they put up the power plant without any regard to the community. Matter of fact, most of the community weren't even given notice that the power plant was coming in. They just saw something going up. So this power plant could have been put anywhere up and down the river.
All right, I'm Reggie Horton, plant manager of Holly Street Power Plant. Holly Street Power Plant is a 600 megawatt generating station employing about 53 employees. Our only fuel is natural gas, and we can generate as little as 20 megawatts up to the full 600 megawatts. So it's a very versatile power plant. So the operators interface now via the keyboard and also the touch screens, which is the highest level of modernization of how you can control a power plant. If you build a brand new one today, you have the same type of controls in it. We're a lot more in the spotlight than the other two power plants. Events that occur here and make the news could occur in other plants, and nobody will ever know about it.
been wanting them to close their power plant for years. And I'm sure the community as a whole would like to see them moved and the power plant closed and turned into part of the recreation center.
We're getting ready to play a bingo. Come on, everybody, let's play bingo. Necesitamos más gente para comenzar el bingo ya. Ya estamos listos.
The thing is, everywhere you go, they got something that people don't want, and we gotta live with it. That plant over there doesn't bother me. I live on 2nd Street.
It sounded like you go and you put air in your tire, and you know how you let it go and it goes like that. Okay, but except twice. I mean, really, really, really loud.
If it wasn't detrimental to the health of the citizens, I don't have a problem with it. I've lived in this neighborhood all my life, and we've never had a problem with it until they started having chemical leaks and the fires there.
On October 31st of 2001, we had a fire event initiated from a breaker.
This last fire that happened on Halloween night, you had all the children. I mean, everybody was out. And then the smoke and the smell was all over the city, or especially there in the community. And no one really knew what to do.
That was very scary, especially that some of the residents were not notified right away.
Smoke was from wood burning. It was plywood that generated all of the smoke that the people smelled. That would not have imposed a hazard to the neighborhood. It's essentially no more than a house fire, no more than like the roof of a house that has plywood on it burning.
There's all kind of fears for the community there. Smoke was all over. The kids were walking into the smoke. There was no security plan. There was no evacuation plan. There was nothing in telling people to go, stay in their homes, and go to the convention center, which was within throwing arms of the Holly Power Plant.
It was the community that called the fire station and not the Holly Power Plant officials.
At the time, it was a small breaking fire, and the plant employees here were in the process of trying to extinguish it. Someone initially called the fire department because they smelled gas. 4 units were on the way to Holly Plant. So there, the fire department had been called, which meant there was no reason for us to call them again because they were already on their way.
They had done a really poor job, and the series of testing that they should have done, they really didn't do. So they really couldn't say it hadn't caused any harm because they hadn't tested for those particular things.
The predominant view on the city council, if not the consensus view, that we need to shut that plant down. I think in the next couple of years, there'll be other opportunities that present themselves that could really bring that data closer to 2005, the original promise made to the neighborhood.
I'm hoping that that is so, because the community is not going anywhere.
No, but when it's across I-35, it seems like anything goes. Well, we have news for them. No, not everything goes here. And we do care, and we have pride here in East Austin. And we feel strongly that these have not been met by the higher-ups. I mean, the decision-making people, they just seem not to care for whatever reason.
Thank you everyone for joining us. We just showed the video on the Holly Power Plant, and so now we're gonna start the panel discussion. So I'm gonna be asking you guys some questions about your involvement with the fight. So the first question is for Marcos. Can you tell us a little more about when you got involved for the campaign to close the Holly Power Plant, and what were your concerns and some of the history behind all that organizing?
I was trying to look back when I actually was asked to participate, and it was joined right after the boat races back in 1978 when East Italian Citizens Neighborhood Association, which at that time was a member, our president, Mr. Rendon, Licha's father, had asked me and Hortensia to put some kind of paper together of what we wanted to do for our neighborhood. And we listed many things. And one of the things on the list, 1978 position paper, was the closing of the Holly Power Plant. In my recollection, that's the first time that the neighborhood association actually put down in writing what they want things done. And one was the Holly Power Plant. And over the years, I was always somehow involved. And later, as I became president, I just took a bigger role and just taking the concerns of the people. This whole thing was driven by the neighborhood. That's the thing that's very key here, that the neighborhood itself, la gente que vivía allí, actually drove this and asked us who were in leadership positions to take that position that they wanted us to. And that's kind of how I started getting back in 1978, then 80 and 84, and later on when I was county commissioner, I took a bigger role at that time, talking to Raul at that time, was about actually doing something to close the power plant. And it took a long time. But I think in my recollection, that's when I actually started to work on it. And throughout the years, I served, like some of us here, served on the closure committee. And later on, we served in an actual working with the city to begin the process of closing and getting amenities for the neighborhoods in that area as well. And then working with Dr. Herrera and Susana Poder, actually not going just beyond the noise and all the confusion and the fears of the people, to actually come out with a study about the actual particulars, which you can talk about that, what they actually was spewing out of the plant and how it was harmful to ourselves within what we breathed into our bodies. And that came to the Poder and their concerns. So it's a combination of a lot of things of bringing it together. But my recollection started in 1978 when the Action Neighborhood Association actually put it on paper and gave it to the city and said, these are the things we're concerned. I think they were a bit surprised that Mr. Rendon could come up with something. So we gave him the credit because he was our leader at the time. And so he should get the credit for that to begin the process at that time. I think that's my best recollection.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I think you mentioned that the community members were the leader, and I think that's so important for, everything to be driven by the community. And the next question is for Elisa. Can you talk to us a little bit about the Halloween fire and what occurred and what were all the concerns around it? You're still on mute, sorry. You gotta click the unmute button right on the bottom.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what I can recall is that, like what Marco has just said, it was back then when we decided that there was issues that were concerning the neighborhood, the fires, the pollutants that were polluting the air. I mean, from the power plants, and then the concerns we had because we had generators that were already out, that they needed to it was the 30-year plan generators that needed to be removed and replaced. So that was a concern we had in the neighborhood. And also in energy, and my former colleague, Mr. Robert Dundee, he and I would meet with at the Austin Energy Department about the power plant. And we decided to do a board member committees of leaders. And my dad was involved, Mr. De Leon was involved, and myself, and Mr. Robert Donnelly, and Paul Hernandez. So we decided to get together and then do an organization where we needed some input and support for the neighborhood, so that because we were having a lot of children in the area that were coming into our neighborhood for the what did you call it? The black party that we were having every year through El Concilio. And so, and then there were some environmental issues because of the pollutants and people getting sick. So Poder got involved with us, and she was in that organization where Poder started doing health, what do you call it? Surveys. And I was involved with her and many of the members here at the community to go door to door to figure out what was happening. And on Halloween, going back to Halloween black parties, the city would fund a lot of us to do these things to put a safety barrier there for our kids on Halloween. But that day, that night that it happened, the fire happened on the Halloween. Black people were getting set up for doing a Halloween black party, but it took a couple of months to prepare. But we had to, just do it later, like a couple of hours later, because we were afraid of the fire and how far it was going to get to the area where we did the block party. And so I was so concerned about that because we were in APD, the police, what is the fire department, us, the city departments would not notify the community that there was that these things could happen in this neighborhood, and we had had several of them before this. And then, but we were never told that it could expand or blow up or whatever. But anyway, that's why we were so involved, and I was real concerned about that. I went reaching out to my leaders and to the environmental groups. It was Poder, and I remember working with Dr. Sylvia Herrera and Susana. We could talk about the concerns we had and why we didn't have the, what do you call it? Yeah. And so there was nothing for us, we had to go door to door. I had to run and knock on my neighbor's door and tell them, you need to go out, go further up, we don't know what's going to happen. If the fire, they're going to contain the fire, and we may not have, and we had all these kids running here and there, and we were telling them, we're just going to have to wait for the block party and see if the fire, gets contained. But we didn't know. We didn't get too close to it. I didn't, because I was trying to put a barrier there for the community not to come over here, because we had something else could have happened. So those were my issues, and that's why I got involved. My dad, Mr. De Leon, Pablo Hernandez, Mr. Donley, he said, he was one of the pioneers. That he said, y'all need to work hard and don't let them the city, put you out to the side and not give you any information, or put a safety net on this neighborhood. And that's what we were asking. They gave us little radios, and I mean, if the electric was off, you couldn't even get to the radios. But anyway, that was my concern, to put a safety net for our neighborhood in case there's, and then we looked at the fact that for many meetings that we had, and we protested, that there was issues regarding the power plant, the pollutants, the leakage of oil into our water to the town lake. And so we decided to protest to shut it down. So we've been struggling since then. So pass it on to Susana. She can give you a little bit more of what we try to do out there in the community, and do a reach out on that Halloween.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's definitely terrifying to know that, they've let so many pollutants in the community, and also that they were, fully fires that weren't, the Holly Power Plant didn't take responsibility for. And speaking of health issues, Dr. Sylvia Herrera, can you tell us a little more about the health surveys that were done at the Holly Power Plant, and what were some of the results?
Yes, like Marcos, I went back a little bit trying to find out specific information from of when we did the survey, but and the results, because to us the most vulnerable are the elderly, and the Mets Rec Center had the senior activity center, or a senior luncheon program there, and right next to the Holly Power Plant, and then the children in the area. So the survey looked at different health issues that were happening in the community. And we looked at the noise, and we looked at the electromagnetic fields, and other, like what was coming out of the fires. But the residents themselves, like was mentioned, participated in this, to go door to door to collect the information. And it's very basic information, but it's very, very important to link it to whatever facility. And in this case, it was the Holly Power Plant. But what we found were, we did over 100 surveys, but there was like 400 or more families and adults and children that we collected information. And what was so sad was the cancer in the children that we found, and the cancer in the women that we found, the breast cancers. And we found the learning disabilities of the children that lived in the area because of the disruption of the noise that was disrupting even in the classrooms and the teachers having to deal with the noise. And so these were the issues that came out of the survey. And that's what the information that we presented, because and the hearing loss that people had, because of the noise was so, it exceeded the levels even of the airport. That's how bad it was. And so it was a real concern, because once you lose your hearing, it's gone. It's nothing that can be replaced other than, getting a hearing aid or some kind of device. But we did the workshops to show people, what it is and how it happens, and made the connection. And so that's what we found, that, and they were affecting everybody's health. You couldn't sleep at night. It was disrupting people's normal activities, or activities that other people were enjoying on the west side, but we had to deal with the power plant noise and the electromagnetic fields. So yeah, that's the very basic information that we presented, but it was very strong evidence that we presented to City Council and to all the different agencies, including the State Department or the State Health Department,
Right.
as well as the Austin Travis County Health Department. And so I don't know if there's other things that you could add, Susana.
Yeah, I'll come on after Raul.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so those health surveys were definitely crucial in like bringing awareness, like you said, about all the health issues and how the community was impacted. And they were also central in like using that as evidence to show City Council and to like petition to close down the power plant. So Raul, you participated in door-to-door organizing, and then you were later elected to the Austin City Council. Could you tell us a little bit more about, what happened with City Council, and how did you guys with the Holly Power Plant Closure Committee push your agenda of closing down the Holly Power Plant?
Well, thank you, Alexia, for the question, and for the invitation to be on the panel, and to the distinguished members of the panel, because I definitely give all the credit to community for not giving up the struggle, right, to close the plant, and probably through who knows how many different council representatives, right, that it finally happened. So I, did some of the community surveys that Sylvia talked about, just going door to door as a graduate student at UT, and, being bilingual, obviously it's very important when you're going door to door on the East Side. And then we helped with the Title VI, filing a Title VI civil rights complaint. I was assisting through the Lone Star chapter of Sierra Club, different communities with Title VI. And Poder was way ahead, other communities in terms of filing Title VI complaints. But again, as a way of keeping the issue on the front burner, right? And so when I got elected, there had already, in 2000, there had been already a resolution passed in 1995 saying you have to close the plant in 10 years. So I get in there in 2000, and my first meeting in the executive session, because everything having to do with Austin Energy happens in executive session because of
proprietary thing, you know what I mean? It's competitive things having to do with the deregulated market or whatever. So all this stuff happens behind closed doors. The community doesn't know what's happening, right? So
Yeah.
so I get in there first meeting and I goes, where's the plan to close the power plant, right? Because it's 5 years into the 10 years you had to close it. And they say, well, there's no plan. And I'm like, well, how are you going to close a power plant if there's no plan? You know, you can't do it, right? I mean, so, and then I looked at their long-term plan, right, for how we're going to serve the needs, the electrical needs of our community for the next 10 to 20 years. And in all the plans, it still showed we're getting this much energy from the Holly power plant. And I said, well, it sure doesn't seem like you're planning on shutting it down, but there's a council resolution saying that you need to. So then, like, I don't know, a year or two after, I got elected, then we had to announce, well, we can't close it in 5 years, right? Which was not very welcome news to the community. But I did commit to say, well, I'm going to try to bring it back to as close to 2005 as we can. So we started setting aside money every year for replacement and repair. We had to use this code language, right? So that people didn't know this is the money to close the power plant. And every time we would refinance debt, because Austin Energy has a lot of debt, right? So when you refinance debt, you save millions of dollars, right? Because there's a lot of debt. And I would say, well, we want to take that savings and we're going to put it in the repair and replacement fund. And so I was a thorn on their side for like many years, like trying to find money in the budget, which I was pretty good at, and trying to put it in this fund to close the power plant, until they finally said, I do have to give credit to Juan Garza. That was a pivotal time at Austin Energy when Juan Garza was the general manager, and he really understood the importance of closing that facility, right? And he understood when the city council makes a decision, it's the job of the city manager and the department directors to deliver. And so it closed in 2006, not 2005, but that's a lot better than 2010. And it was really expensive to do. And I don't think I'm at liberty to say how much it cost, but let's just say it was hundreds of millions of dollars to actually replace the power plant. And what really made me mad, one of the things that, a lot of it made me mad because, this is a commitment and a directive from city council, and there really was no intent to do it, right? So, but what would piss me off at the end of the year is they would tell us, this is how much money we made from the Holly power plant, right? It was extra energy that would get sold, in the marketplace, and we would make $20-30 million a year just off of the Holly power plant. And that's when I said, well, we're going to take all that money and we're going to put it in this fund to close the darn thing. And gracias a Dios, we were able to do it. But without the community really advocating loudly, I mean, that is such a pivotal component, and I know it's tough. And Commissioner, you've been on both sides of that, but you know that it's very important to have that community voice, because it gives the officials the cover and the ability, right, to strongly advocate and to hold other elected officials accountable too, right? Because at that time when I was on the council, everybody was at large. So I kept reminding people, look, these are your constituents too. They're not just Raul's constituents and Danny Thomas's constituents. So yeah, it was very interesting to be on the inside. But again, I credit the community with the victory because of 30-40 years of advocacy, and I'm really just honored to have played a small role in that. So gracias.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then Susana, can you talk a little bit about all the different organizing strategies, some that the others have already mentioned that BODED was able to use to successfully close down the Holly power plant?
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to recognize all the community and the community leaders, because really, as Raul said, you can't make those changes unless, there are things happening at the community level, and the community level, they're raising the points to get the issue out. And I always say one of the most important issues is the health survey, because when you go door to door, then you let people know there is a problem and that you recognize that there is a problem. And when you can coincide the health problems of what the community is undergoing, it becomes very real. So if I would say there's, 40 pounds of particular matter going out there, that's not, people don't really understand it. Or if I say the electromagnetic fields is exceeding 2.0 milligauss that you're supposed to be exposed to, what does that really mean? So you really have to say, well, that means that you can have hearing loss. That means that you can have nervous conditions. That means that your children can have learning disabilities. That means that you can have cancer in the area. And when people start to hear that, it becomes very real because they know they and their family are undergoing a lot of these health problems. And that's why I really thank Dr. Sylvia Herrera, because she's brought that tool, and she was the first Chicana to get her PhD from East Austin. And so she brought that tool and those learning abilities to the community and shared it with us. And then we were able to go out into the community. And so when you can put out the real health issues to the city or to the state, to the officials, it's very real and they know it. And you notice that nobody could fight the stats that we came up with. Even what the city did at Met's school was they created like a health fair and started testing. There was one day of testing people for, the hearing loss, all kinds of issues. And then they also did testing for diabetes. So they were able to do a big health fair, and that was the community pushing that forward. And it was because of the health survey. And the other tool, what like Raul touched on, was the whole Title VI. The whole Title VI was a federal policy, is under the Civil Rights Act, when you disproportionately impact communities of color. So we used that tool to file a federal complaint against the city of Austin because it had received funding, federal fundings. And so we were able to use that tool because the city was receiving federal funding, and say, but look how they're doing it in Holly, and how we could prove 84% of the population were Latinos who lived around the Holly power plant. There's no question of environmental racism going on there. When you look who was disproportionately, who was taking on the burden, like Marco says, the community was taking on the burden. So we had all the stats, but that was our way to have another press conference to announce that we had done this complaint at the federal level, going all the way up. So that was a real important tool that we were able to use to get, recognition, and for not just the community in the city of Austin to know, but this goes out to all the states throughout the national level about what's really happening in East Austin, Texas. And we have to remember that this was the height of the environmental justice movement. This was happening throughout the United States, where communities of color were coming out and really saying, look, we're tired of being exposed to all these toxic facilities. We're tired of being poisoned. Our children and our elderly are all sick. And so it was like the perfect moment to be organizing and talking about, because environmental justice was in a high position. President Clinton in 1994 had signed the executive order 12898 on environmental justice. The states now were looking at implementing environmental justice, state offices. So it was a real good time to come out about what was really happening in the community. And I think the other important part, and Elisa talked on it real, shortly, was the Holly Street Power Plant Closure Committee. That was one of the most powerful steps, because if you remember, the city had put together a Holly Power Plant Committee, and it said, well, only 5 representatives of the community could sit on that committee. And they had the majority of people. So the community could never really get anything done because they were always overridden by the city representatives. So Gavino, Marcos, everybody broke away, and the model was the one that Dr. Herrera had established during the Tank Farm Citizens Monitoring Committee. So the Holly Power Plant Committee was established in 1994, and it forced the elected officials to come to the community. And I think a lot of people here will remember them coming to the Mets Recreation Center, elected people, city energy and state people, but the community was in control. It wasn't, it flips. That's what happens when you have the community in control. Instead of community being the audience, the officials are in the audience and the community is running the table. So that was another really good community organizing tool. The other one was the videos. You just got to see one video. That was very powerful video. But there were several videos. There was a video also too that Renee Renteria put together. There was videos that the UT put together. So there was a lot of video exposure. So people who didn't realize what the community were living next to got to see it physically, right, through a whole video presentations. And then the other ones were every time that there was an issue, there had to be a press conference, right? The fire, there had to be a press conference. There were regular, press conference at the Holly to make sure that people would see what the demonstrations that were going on, and going to the city council, going to, the commissions, the boards and commissions to talk about the Holly Power Plant. These were all organizing tools. I think Concilio came up with a T-shirt on Holly, the Holly Power Plant. And so that was really effective of having, when we think about it, all of these things are very important organizing tools. We did a toxic tour. So we invited the West environmentalists to come over, and we did a tour through the Holly and what was there so they could physically see how close the homes were. I mean, they were like in spitting distance from the Holly Power Plant so that people could see what was really happening close to the Holly Power Plant. And so all of these tools and all of the community organizing and involvement, like Raul said, we had to continue putting the pressure. Even though we knew filing the Title VI at the federal level was probably not going to get any results, but it was a very good organizing tool, and it was a way to get the issue out on a national level of what was happening in East Austin, Texas. So there was a lot of organizing going on and the pressure to close the Holly Power Plant.
I'd like to share something anecdotal about this situation. When the Camacho rec center was going to be built, the city of Austin tried to use HUD monies. It didn't qualify, and I'll tell you why. Because the blast zone, if that Holly plant was to explode, it went beyond the blast zone. So therefore, they could not get monies from HUD to build that Camacho Center. So they went to the mitigation money to get that. That's just an example how, even though we were getting told it's all gonna be okay, it's gonna be all right, don't worry about it. As the neighbors at night would call me. I remember one time telling a council member about, well, can I have your phone number, your home phone number, so I can have Ms. Gonzalez or Mr. Gonzalez if they're on Haskell and call you at 4 o'clock in the morning that the power plant's bad. And that's the kind of call we used to get, right, Licha? They used to come to our house and tell us, or come give us a call. You need to do something, Mr. De Leon. Commissioner, you need to do something. So the idea was here is that actually was at a federal level. They say, no, you can't have that money because you're within the blast zone. Yeah, we were not aware of that. When we became aware of that, we shared that with the neighborhood, and Licha's father got up and said, wait a minute, what about this? Why is it you can't get money because there's an explosion going on? We'll all be wiped out. The house, like, live right next door. I mean, everybody there on Holly, on Haskell, Riverview, all those will be gone. But it just kind of let you know how the city would sometimes play things on us and not reveal to us things they try to do they couldn't be done because of the situation that could occur there. And that was one of the biggest fear, share with y'all that the neighborhood had, and we all knew that, is that they were really scared. They were really frightened when there was a fire there. They were supposed to set things up and they just didn't work. And I never forget that night, talking about the night at the Holly on the 31st, the newspaper over there. And they were right there right there on the corner of Mildred, and the fire was going on, and one city official, one city staff member was there from who they got some. And I asked him, why don't you ask him if we're on this grid, if the Holland plant service this grid right here in East Austin. And on record, he said, no, sir. He told the reporter, this grid serves downtown.
That's true.
That's the kind of things why the neighborhood was so strong in doing this, because we know we're being duped constantly. And not being told the truth, that grid didn't even serve the house where Licha lived there, where her father lived at. It didn't serve him at all. So that's
Can I add something to you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, even the lines were across our backyards.
Right.
And they were not even serving us. They were serving downtown. So all those energy pollutants that were coming out, they were coming out to our homes and outside where our kids used to play. So that was a real safety issue that we were concerned. I said, why don't you put them on the other side, the lines? But they wouldn't do that. So, Marcos, you're right with all the stuff that we have gone throughout the years, the struggles. Now, we don't have families right now that we've lost a lot of families with cancer, lung issues, a lot of learning disabilities. Now they're closing our school. They should have closed it back then. But now, we're having a lot of issues. Still, the planet's gone, but there's still a lot of stuff that we have to be faced with. And that was the discrimination, the health, they were trying to mitigate us with putting windows for the noise to impact, the noise that was going to help us from hearing. And when we were growing up in this neighborhood, but all kinds of stuff that we had to go through, and it's just sad. And I'm still here, but I've lost several family members from cancer. A sister, a brother, and another nephew. We all were in this neighborhood. We lived here. So, and a lot of my neighbors, the Guerreros, all these families, I've lost families for cancer, lung disease. And we all have some kind of immune system diseases that are phenomenon that we don't even know where they came from. So anyway, and I'm one of them. So I don't know what, I got disabled too. But going back, the power plant had a lot of issues. We did block parties for our kids just to keep them safe on the other side of high school. We did, that's what the city was giving us from the Howley power plant. They were just giving us a little bit of money so we could, settle the community with, giving us something for a safety net, which to me was nothing. There's all kinds of stuff that went on that we all knew. We worked together hard, and I'm very proud that Marcos stayed along, Gavino and Susana and you, that you were all together and working together. And now we have to continue on this. The legacy of this power plant was very damaging to a lot of our families that we've lost, and we continue to move on with the struggle. Okay, that's all I wanted to say, Marcos.
Now, I want to follow up because you mentioned the power lines. And so one of the things that we looked at was that there were 69 kilowatt lines coming down. Those are very hazardous to the communities. And we looked at the health impact of those 69 kilowatt. They did not belong coming down Holly and through the neighborhood. And I think, Sylvia, you'll remember that Dr. John Bianacci coming in on this particular issue. Do you remember his recommendations that he made?
They be moved.
Yeah, it was once we brought up the issue that they had to face the reality and point out these things, but a lot of times we had to force the issue for them to respond and say, where else do you find these type of lines? You don't find them in other residential areas, but sure enough, you're finding them in the Holly power plant area, or you're in East Austin. and but you're not finding them in other parts of the city. So we always had to do a comparison of what's happening on the west side versus what's happening on the east side, and point that out, because otherwise they weren't going to say, well, this or that, but they never would come out and provide actual recommendations unless we force the issue.
Mhm.
And I'd love to talk about some of your thoughts on kind of the future of the environmental justice movement and kind of what we can take away from all your experiences that wasn't that long ago, and how it can be applied to issues that are still ongoing today. You know, as you guys mentioned, the health issues are still ongoing. There's the legacy of the pollution, and there's still, you know, plenty of issues today, especially with climate change and people of color still being disproportionately impacted. What are some of the things you see in the East Austin community, and what do you think we need to do going forward? And anyone can answer.
Well, before we move on, I just, because Marcos had talked about, you know, the Camacho Center and so forth, and I think Alicia talked about people going there in case there was a catastrophe or something. But I do remember, I think, Marcos and Alicia, you all and Gabino, a lot of people working on the evacuation plan. Can you tell us a little bit of how you were able to get that funding? I think Alicia talked a little bit about the windows and stuff, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, let me share this with y'all. When I was county commissioner, we worked together on a tank farm, and I remember the cause and effect. I remember our county attorney, Ken Noden, said there's a black and white law that says in the state that you cannot harm health and welfare of the community. And that's what they went on, that the tank farm was affecting the health and welfare of the community. And it's in black and white because it's on white paper and black lettering. And I use the same thing when I approach the city, that if that power plant is causing harm to the health and welfare of this community, then you're violating the state law. And I think that's where the mitigation money came in. You know, that if understand what mitigation, the meaning of that basically is that you're mitigating the harm that's caused. And that changed the neighborhood fund later on, community fund. But that's basically what it was. And the city jumped on that because you know what's going on. So that money was used for many things in the community. And interesting when you're talking about what I approached at that time when Garza was the fact that you're providing retrofitting the windows of the community in East Austin. Pero what I would tell me, Mr. Daniel, it doesn't mean no good. Say, ¿por qué? Because no tengo air conditioning, I can cerrar las ventanas, no, el ruido está mal, ya se acabó el ruido, pero yo estoy no caliente, mucho calor. So what we work with the energy department, Alicia, remember, we used to meet with them, where they provided in that part that if you were in a certain income, that you would use monies from the same monies from the power plant to pay off that extra $100 they would pay for the energy they would use. If they got an air conditioner and they closed the windows, then that extra $150, the city would eat that up in kind of a way. Those are the kind of things we have to work with, because the mitigation maybe worked that way, but it didn't always work that way because the people would say it doesn't do any good. And then also foundations. Remember the vibrations from the holiday power plant would cause the foundations of the home to become uneven. So there's a lot of things we tried to do, and also in housing, to using that money to mitigate some of the harm that the plant had done. And one of the things was Licha and her family run the Halloween block party every Halloween night. And then we would bring in different resources to come into the community. But those things were done in the jest of what harm it was causing. And that's what used to bother me a lot. And so you need to get rid of the power plant. It just took a long time, longer than most folks really wanted to. Before Mr. Donnelly passed away, he was passing because he had cancer. He told me, will you stay long enough to close the plant? And I said, I would. And after the plant was closed, that's when within the year I was gone as president of the association. That's very real. The understanding when a man is dying and in his last years of fighting to close something, because Mitch gave him credit. He's the one that fought the city on that closure committee, and he felt it was wrong. So he forcefully forced the city to accept his terms and the terms of the community, which they would run the meetings. And you're right. He was real frustrated because the city of Austin staff would always outvote the community 6-5, right? There's 11 members, 6 city and 5 community. So that was very real. So I'll give him Mr. Dowling credit for doing that and saying forcefully saying, we're going to do it this way. And later on, they formed with Mr. Backus, the committee to continue to actually close it and mitigate it and get it closed. And I don't know if Leach still has the boat from the Howard power plant that we all given a boat that was removed to the first removal. What's going on now is the fact that there's still a problem, but it's the people who were there are not us. I mean, I'm still there like Licha. We're still neighbors 4 or 5 blocks away from each other. But a lot of us are gone. The taxes and everything has gone. So, Raul, since you're a former colleague of the city council, something has to be said for all these folks who are enjoying what we're at in the Holly. That's to be said and have send a thank you to people like her father, Mr. Rendon, and Mr. Donnelly, Mr. Guerrero, who fought to get rid of the plant and Poder, and Dr. Herrera with her studies. They just added what we were trying to say, prove the fact what we're doing. A nice thank you to the Mexican community for preserving such a beautiful neighborhood, because that's what it is. And they're benefiting from the labors of my good friend Paul Hernandez and her father, Mr. Rendon, and Mr. Pete Martinez, Ranhead, all those people who fought to get rid of that plant and to build a beautiful barrio. And it's a beautiful barrio, and no matter what people say. So I just kind of come back to you with saying what the struggles we had and how hard it was. And I'm 74 years old, and used to go back 1978. That's a long time, very long time. But I do want to thank Dr. Herrera and as you, Raul, and as you, Susana, for bringing in that expertise, that professional expertise to add to what the barrio was talking about. We know we couldn't hear half the time. We didn't know why. Now you told us why. And we remember the kids at Metz, the kids at Zavala, how the problems they were having. But y'all exposed that. And it was very critical. It's hard to argue. Sometimes you can say, oh, what are the pendejos que están ahí on the east side? No, wait a minute. We have a very educated person that can tell you what you know, what you understand. The facts are there. So I'm just saying thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And I do think it's, again, just the fact that the parkland hasn't even been open to the community. To me, that's still a continued slap in the face, because we closed it in 2006, right? And there has been no activity on the site for how many years? And they just won't give up the 3 acres. Something about land and controlling the land and denying access to the community, to the land, and not even that, but I do think, again, even the gentrification, right? It's still about the land, right? We're going to put the stuff we don't want over there in your neighborhoods. But now that y'all cleaned it up, and that's really what happened, right? The community advocated to get rid of all the toxic industries. And then all of a sudden, everybody thought, hey, this is a good place to live. La gente, right? The longtime residents then are the one who suffered. And I still think that's something I keep working on with the Conservancy. How do we help the elders especially stay in the neighborhood and meet the needs that they have? And we've been lucky working with the different contact teams. We've been able to raise some money to do more of that. And so, but very little support from the elected officials. Pero todos dicen que it's such a bad thing that's happening to East Austin, ¿verdad? Just like they would say that about the Holly Power Plant and the tank farm, but it's it's in the actions, right? And in actually pushing the city to the limits to do more, and it can do more. And on the gentrification piece and helping the folks stay in the neighborhood who want to stay in the neighborhood, and No Poder works on that, and Concilio and other folks And so I will continue to work on that as well, because I do think that's it's another injustice, right? That after cleaning up the community, ya te quieren correr, you know what I mean? That's just, I mean, for me, it's unacceptable,
I wanna,
you know.
yeah, I want to say, but I also want to give thanks
Yeah.
to the kid that when I left, I turned it over to Berta Delgado, Lich's daughter, and she hasn't given up, right? You know, no matter I agree with the way she does things, then again, they never agree with how Paul nice to do things, or even me sometimes. But there's some people still help, that still depend on, and she'll call me once in a while, Marcos, I need you here. I said, why? That's fail. Get over there. You know, not really, but it's just understanding how people continue to fight what we have in the barrio. This is why it's hard for me to leave. It's, even though the pressure is there for me and Hortensia to leave, but we're still there and we're still fighting what we can. And you know, I got a little punch left here and there, but again, that's something that has to happen. You're right. Our barrio is very beautiful. It was always beautiful. The most beautiful people in the world. When I used to run for office, say, why are you in the east side? Where you live? In the west side. You love being in the west side? Yes. I say, well, thank you. Now you know how I feel. And that's just how we always felt.
I would like to add to Raul, Berta, myself, with East Town Lake Citizens Neighborhood Association, we're still at it. And you're right about the land, parkland. It's been a struggle. The 90 acres that the power plant was supposed to be turned it over to parks. Now the new people that are coming in through Parks Foundation, they're taking the lands and they're trying to develop it the way they want to. We don't have representation in this area of leadership, like our councilman. He says there's no Mexicanos here anymore. There's no families, but we're still here. And we're still fighting, and we're gonna fight to the end. I just had a big meeting with Austin Parks Foundation 2 weeks ago. Trails Foundation. They're giving monies for the trail, plus going through Rendon Park and through all the area, but they still have a hand, the city and the parks, together with that 90 acres that were supposed to be given to the community. And there's a lot of pollutants still in those areas. Now they want to build docks. They want to have that to be swimming areas. They want to bring their own canoeing. So we don't have no more. The people are coming in, want to put in concessions. They want to put in their own boating in there. When we had this already taken care of, that there is a settled lake. It is for viewing, for people to enjoy the lake, our park, but it is gone to the max right now. We're in a big fight with that to preserve the neighborhood park that we had. Now it became a metropolitan park because those 90 acres were added to that. Mira, Raul, we've been going through a lot. The environmental, the Camacho building is gone. It's now a building that used to be for our community, for our kids, our elders, that they could go in there and do projects. Is no longer there. It's the parks made the city of Austin allowed a proposition for them to make money out of that area and to serve some of the kids, and it's become canoeing attraction for all over the city and all over the world to come in and serve themselves. So those are the things that I'm very concerned, and the safety that we fought for so long, the environmental injustice that we fought, and a lot of our families died because of that. And it's sad that we're being pushed out now. Now that it's beautiful, Raul, it's so beautiful. And you had a lot of it to help us out. Susana, all of us in the community, we all joined together at that time. We've lost a lot of leaders now, and we have to continue educating our new generation to stay with the fight, because these lands belong to us. And this land is going to stay with us.
And
I want to follow up with that. Thank you, Alicia, for bringing that forward, because I think as we work to clean up East Austin, And when Poder took on the battle as being the first environmental justice group in East Austin, because we all know there were a lot of mainstream environmental groups in Austin, but they were not crossing Highway 35, and they were not at that time looking at the environmental issues that were impacting our community. Since that time, we've joined forces and we've become allies, and we've learned that the environment is not just in West Austin, but it's also in East Austin. But in those 90s, early 90s and 2000, it was people of color who really were bringing up that we did have an environment and we needed to protect it. Now, regarding Holly, I remember when the Holly neighborhood plan was coming forward at that time. And I know, Marcos, you remember, because our first fight was against the Cesar Chavez plan. And all the issues that we brought up against the Cesar Chavez plan came to reality of the dislocation and displacement of communities of color and commercializing our community. But in the Holly at that time, the Holly neighborhood, which I said at that time was 84% Latino, they were 67% owners of their properties. Right. That's very, we had a higher ownership per capita than all of Austin. Because you have to remember in those times, nobody wanted to live in East Austin because that's where communities of color, that's when the first white flight took place. The whites that were here, they left because they said, we're gonna relocate all the people of color to East Austin. So, you know, our people, our families bought and built houses from $2,000 to $18,000. They're now valued at $500,000. So this is what has happened when Alexia said, well, what are the issues, the next issues? Well, our biggest issue now is gentrification. Yeah. Gentrification is as we cleaned up Austin, East Austin, as Michael says, then the onslaught came on of people coming into the community who had no historical context on the fight and the struggle that the community had taken to clean up the community, right? Only to then be forced out of the community that we had cleaned up to make it very livable and friendly and safe for our children and our elderly. Then the whole gentrification came in, and that's because of the city of Austin and the people in power and the real estate, the board. You think about all the different people that are involved in real estate, all the power players, Chamber of Commerce, who have decided that they were going to jump the highway and come to East Austin, when at one time it was taboo to live in East Austin. And all of a sudden the land grab, and you're absolutely right, Michael, it's all about the land, Elisa. It is about the land grab. It's the biggest issue that we've had to take on in our whole lives. Because I remember early when we started, and I had a university student come in and he said, Susana, do you know what's going to happen if you all began to clean up the community? What's going to happen? And I said, what? And he said, gentrification. Gentrification is going to come in, and little by little, you all are going to be displaced. And I remember going to the Poder board and saying, look, our aim was to close down the most hazardous facilities in East Austin. Right. And I said, but what's going to happen is that as we clean up East Austin, you know, I've been advised and told that gentrification is going to come in, and I want to let everybody know. I said, so what do we do? And so the board was unanimous. We're moving forward. We're going to make sure to protect the health of our elderly, of our children and our families, and then we'll worry about gentrification. But I tell you, gentrification is a bigger issue than fighting corporations, because in corporations, you know who you're fighting. And the city, you know who you're fighting. But when you have gentrification, you're fighting thousands of people. It's not just one entity. You know, it's, you know, chambers, it's board of realtors, it's individual people coming in who, you know, buying up land. And so it's not just one entity, and that's what makes it the real challenging. But the biggest challenge is zoning. And Alicia, you brought it up. Councilman Renteria is not an advocate. Under Councilman Renteria's reign as a city council member, we've lost more single family housing than the whole history of the city of Austin. in East Austin. You know, Alexia's helped us put together a demolition report. We're still working on it, but it tells that where have we lost our housing, and it's been the majority in East Austin. And so we know that we don't have the protection or someone really advocating for us, whether it's COVID, getting the vaccine, getting the testing. I mean, you know, we have all these people, mostly people of color, who are ill or who are in hospitals or who have died. We have a high percentage, but we don't really have an advocate at the council. And so we're constantly having to fight like Code Next. And good thing we have ally lawyers who are helping us fight in court, you know, and stuff like that. But those are real. I think one of the biggest challenges is gentrification. And it is part of the environmental racism that is happening, because gentrification is the displacement of communities of color. And gentrification is part of the land grab that goes back, you know, centuries of what has happened to the indigenous people, you know, on this continent. And so for me, gentrification is a big issue. The other one is climate change, climate justice, because who's undergoing the flooding, who doesn't have the infrastructure, is communities of color. Who is undergoing the heat island? It is communities of color because of high density development. All of these things, I think that those are two big top issues for communities of color, you know, that have been going on, but really are going to take us on for years to come.
That's a big thing.
And we actually have a question from the chat that asks if you guys can talk about the potential release of toxins that are in the ground if any new construction is done at the site where the Holly power plant was. Is that a concern for you guys?
Well, I could say the last meeting we had that they were lifting up all the whatever they dug up after the ground, that there was still mercury and there was still some other pollutants that were in the ground because of the water, the leakage of that plant. Supposedly they took it all out and they filled it up with good land, soil or whatever. But still, we didn't get a last report. We did not get. I was one of the last ones that I recall, but to see if it was okay. And the city kept saying to us that they were waiting for the state to do the last testing on the water and the land there before they would release this whole thing to the parks department regarding the 90 acres. We're still going to have grits, or you call them grits, that they do carry electric. So half of that is going to be blocked, and we're still going to have some kind of pollutants coming out of those lines that are coming through here. But that's what I can recall. That's what
I think one of the things that Lee just said, and I think Bertha's working on, I've been to some of the meetings that they've had, and it seems like when they talk of Metropolitan Park, you know, Festival Beach from I-35 to Longhorn Dam was supposed to be a pristine, environmental friendly place. They did some of it in the area, but it was supposed to be for families to go down, and that's supposed to have boating and bicycles there, or anything commercial. That's the part that's bothered me. That's gotten too commercial. And Licha and the neighborhood, you know, that the biggest thing we ask for, we don't want that much commercial in that area. It's basically for familias, for any family in any part of Austin. But the fact that we're not supposed to have all that commercial stuff in that area. It's supposed we can hike and bike, you can walk, like a family, you can picnic. The noise only comes from maybe a bicycle or a car that's going to park. Other than that, it's very nice. And you can walk that beautiful that area with there's flowers, there's birds, all what we talked about back in 1978 after the boat races, everything all we have put on there. It's about that. It's about environmental friendly. It's not supposed to have that much asphalt in there and that much, you know, tires going down there. And I noticed that I don't like the idea that boat ramp, there's a canoe there already. It's so commercialized. It's just people are doing. It reminds me of the boat races. They're beginning to throw things, trash the area. They're bringing through plastics and bottles as they go down to down there, and no one's policing that. You're right. It's that is not supposed to be like that. Even the opening up the old Fiesta Garden, the old band is good because people can just come without having to have weird things that are not really conducive to the neighborhood. So I think that's going to be very important in working with the city that you guys are working on is to bring it back to what it's supposed to be. And it's hard. It's hard because people they're like, I don't know what you noticed, the Waterloo Park over there on 12th Street between 12th and it's terrible. I used to love to go and take my kids over there. It was just all wooded area. I don't know, it's real nice. It's just full of concrete now. I think that's what the urban people want. That's what the metropolitan people want, something like that. But that's not what we want. That's not what we asked for way back then. I remember Mr. Donnelly and all the neighbors, all the elders we had back then. That's what they liked, just to go down there con su perrito and just hang out in the park and then come back home. Mr. Morales would live right there right by Riverview and Chico, and that's what he wanted. So it's not what the neighborhood wants. So we need to continue working that. And I'm always available when your birthday needs me. So just give me a call.
I just want to go back to the different people that have participated, and I'm so glad that we're recognizing our elders that have gone on and their contribution and their spirit lives on in all of us, and it's important for all of us to share that with our younger family members and our children, our grandchildren, and younger people that I want to thank through the Young Scholars for Justice, like Alexia has helped so much, and even Raul was a young scholar for justice at one time. There's been so many young people that continue to help, and they're learning and they're teaching us as well, how to Zoom and how to communicate in a different way, so that we can share the history of East Austin and the struggles that we've gone through and the accomplishments of our people, and how we're still continuing to fight regardless of the aches and pains and different ways that we have, right? Because we've had to deal with just the racism that still persists today, and when we were growing up, it's still there and different, and the ugly monster still roars his head at us in trying to take our homeland away from us and the beauty of East Austin. But the commitment that I see of younger people to protect the environment and to protect and preserve the beauty of East Austin, I've seen it through the Young Scholars for Justice, and I want to thank the younger people too that have.
And I want to just add, follow up with Sylvia, because I have to also thank Rene Renteria, because Rene Renteria, he joined us too, as he was a journalist at the University of Texas, a student, just as Raul. Raul had contributed so much to us on learning about, transportation and surveying and the land use and so forth. Actually, Rene Renteria was the one who actually gave classes on how to do press conference, how to do sound bites, teaching us how to go to the editorial boards, to talk about issues, all of these things. So Sylvia is right. It's been the young people that have continuously come to contribute to the community, because it doesn't matter when we're in the Chicano movement. It didn't matter if you lived in Austin or San Antonio or Brownsboro or McAllen or the States. We were all one people, right, working together. And I think that's the beauty of the students at the university. They might live in other cities or in other states, but they recognize the barrio and they recognize the people because they come from that family-based kind of culture, and they want to, how can I help and how can I get involved? And I know that Renee has contributed. He's done a lot of the videos. He has his gallery. He's documenting all the different histories that have come through our, through the community. And so, and now we have, the younger generation through the Young Scholars, through the Concilio, these Town Lake Citizens, all the different neighborhood associations that are stepping in, right? As we get older, we're not as agile and can move around as fast as our young generation, but we always have to keep intergenerational, right? The important is that not to separate ourselves, is that continue that indigenous path of intergenerational with our elders and our youth. We learn from our youth learn from us, and that's kind of the indigenous ways of sharing. And I know that Poder has been very, very fortunate, and there's not a time that we don't have interns from either the University of Texas, St. Edwards, Southwestern University, Texas State, who, want to be involved on different issues and be able to, a lot of the skills that we don't have, GIS and mapping, all of these things, a lot of the tools for people who don't know, but that is a poverty organization. It's always been a poverty organization. People who have come, we say nobody's gonna make you can survive, but it's not a luxurious life that you're gonna be able to live on the salary or the compensation that we can give. But the importance is you're giving something to the community. And that's what the students have always been able to do. They've been able to do things that we couldn't do, access tools that we couldn't, but they leave it there for us so that we can continue to use it. And so I'm very grateful for all the students and for the Young Scholars and neighborhood associations, to Raul, who contributes so much to our organization also. And I know it's not been easy. We didn't know all the back stuff that was happening as he was trying to get the resolutions done to close the power plant. And I know a lot of times attack because a lot of times we don't know what's happening in the back rooms, and we're not allowed to hear those confidential hearings that you all go into, the sessions where you're not allowed to, you're not privy to give it to other people, but you're in those kind of closed sessions with the attorneys and so forth. So yeah, I'm very thankful for the youth and the elders, and I'm glad that you're recognizing Mr. Donley and Mr. Rendon, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Guerrero, all our elders that have contribute so much that we've continued, and Paul Hernandez, I don't want to, forget Paul and a lot of the people who had continued to do all the organizing and how we worked and shared together.
Can I add, Susana, Daniel Llanes? He's with y'all, and I also wanted. He's always been there, and I really admire that he also got his daughter involved.
That's
and,
right.
And I've seen the younger generation that they want to get involved, and they need to get involved in those commissions, and that's a gift. That if you're involved in those commissions, that's how we're going to find out what's going on behind our back doors, that they're making deals without us knowing. And that's been very useful tool for our neighborhood associations in the past, for Concilio and all the members that worked out. We had Francis Martinez, we had all these people working in their organizations, but also in commissions in the city, planning commission, the zoning, and I'm just leave with something that I'm very, thank you. And I'm going to thank you, Susana, and to bringing this up, and Marcos and all of y'all, and that I'm still involved. Now I move a lot of stuff to my younger generation, which is my daughter, and I'll support her in everything I can. But because of my illness, I've been, just stepping back, like, and it's real hard, and in my age too. But I thank all of y'all, and I think that we need to work together and teach our new generation to pursue the fight of all this that we're gonna leave behind, because our years are counted right now. And so I have and one thing is that this demolishing the homes and affordability in our neighborhood needs to come back, and it's going to be a big struggle because of gentrification. And I've lost my dad's home. My last words of my dad says, fight, continue to fight, you until Bertha and everybody, to go and don't let them demolish your homes. They demolished my dad, and it hurts me deep in my heart that I couldn't stop Pio Renteria and the council. And I did everything I could and spent so much because we wanted to preserve my dad's home for affordability for anyone that wanted to live in that home. But it's down to the ground. They made it until now. If you see it, it's horrible. They whoever bought it built a short-term rental home, and it's huge. So that's what, and then we have a lot of homes here in this neighborhood that are empty because we can't afford to live here. They only use them for short-term rentals. And
Yeah.
so, I'm saying as a suggestion, we should tell the city and everybody that are realtors that want affordability for our people, rent those homes. They're empty all the time, and make them affordable. And that's all. Thank you very much for that. And you need to continue. And thank you, Marcos. We're still here.
Yeah.
But like I said, Alexis, thank you very much, and hope that you can see all the struggle and the fight that we put together as a group. We all have differences of opinions and everything. We've done different movements, but we're still here. Thank you very much for all of you.
Oh,
I'm going to say nothing.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to everyone, and for y'all have been an inspiration. Just seeing the level of involvement and advocacy in East Austin, and just trying to do what you can, right? I mean, because y'all set a pretty high bar, so it's like, well, how can we do, again, whatever skills you have, whatever resources, how do we put them to use for the community's benefit, right? We have to be more focused on community and not our own advancement. And I do think the tank farm example, the BFI example, the Holly power plant example are examples of continuing to fight, for something that is just, right? Fighting against inequality, and a lot of times you don't know when the victory will come, right? Or if it will come, but in those three cases, it did come, right? Porque no se dio por vencida la comunidad, right? People didn't give up, right? So I think even with gentrification, we still have hundreds of longtime families on the east side that we can help. And so I think that's one of the lessons is, well, we don't give up. We can't see the solution yet, but I still think there's a solution to be had. And obviously the sooner the better. But I just think that these are examples of how just keeping your eye on the prize really is something that's of utmost importance, even though it may not seem possible to beat the multinational companies, we did, right? In terms of the tank farm and in terms of BFI, right? Because that's another multinational. And then with the Holly power plant, well, you were really up against money, right? It's money is one of the biggest drivers of everything. And the community still got it done. And so I still always hopeful, but I draw inspiration from folks who like y'all who have been involved much longer than myself. And it really inspires me to try to do, again, whatever I can in my power. And that's hopefully what a lot of the folks, I know a lot of the Young Scholars for Justice hopefully also continue to do that wherever they may be. So I know the impact of what's happened in East Austin has reverberated, not just in Austin, but to everywhere the Young Scholars have gone off to. So I'm very thankful for that as well, for the Young Scholars program and for Poder having done that for so many years.
So as we reach almost 7:30, I'm going to wrap up the conversation. So I just want to echo what everyone has said, to thank our elders and everyone in the community that has fought for environmental justice. Thank our amazing panelists that are here with us today for sharing your story, your organizing, this message. And then I want to thank everyone here who has able to join us and watch the video. This is recorded, so it will be uploaded on Poder's YouTube channel, which you can find through our website. So if you want to share with your family or friends that couldn't be here today, you can show them this video. I also want to let everyone know that we will be having another panel specifically speaking on the Young Scholars for Justice, kind of the legacy around that program that has been amazing. And that will be taking place in late August, early September. So look out, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And like Susana said in the chat, our website is poderaustin.org. Again, thank you all for being here tonight. Hope you guys have a great evening, and let's continue to fight for justice together.
Good. We used to say like, que viva el barrio.
Que viva.
Viva.
Que viva la raza.
Que viva.
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 Que viva Hernández.
Que
Viva
viva.
todos los ancianos y la juventud. Que viva todo en East Austin.
Que viva.
Que viva.
Thanks for the audience that watched us today. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Thanks, Alexia.